Hi everyone, Happy New Year and welcome to our first episode of the Research Behind Lift the Lid podcast for 2021. I'm Jessica Cooper and today on episode 27, we will be talking to Associate Professor Caroline Donovan about her research findings. Caroline is a clinical psychologist and associate professor within the School of Applied Psychology at Griffith University. Caroline's interests lie in youth anxiety, depression, sleep and body image issues, and her research focuses on examining the underlying mechanisms of these disorders, as well as the efficacy of treatment strategies within a youth population. From 2018 to 2020, Associate Professor Donovan received a mental health research grant from Australian Rotary Health for her project Treating Sleep Problems in Preschoolers, Improving Mental Health, the Transition to School, and Academic Outcomes. In this episode, we will be talking about the findings from this project. So thank you very much, Caroline, for joining me on today's podcast episode, and Happy New Year. Did you have a nice break over the holidays?
I did, thank you. Yeah, I had a few weeks off, which is unusual, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, so did we. Yeah, it's always good, but it always goes too fast as well.
Really quickly, yeah.
Well, yeah, it's really great to have you on our first podcast episode in 2021 to talk about your research today. So I guess to start off with, what led you to pursue this area of research looking at sleep problems and mental health in preschoolers?
Well, for many years, my background, I suppose, is more in child anxiety disorders and treating them with a variety of different programs, including our online BRAVE program. So I've been doing a lot of research into child and youth anxiety disorders over many, many years, probably the last 25 years or so. And what's really has always struck me, is the number of those kids who've presented with sleep problems as well. So I did a bit of reading in the area just to make sure that it wasn't just sort of anecdotal sort of evidence that this was happening. And the results were amazing. So something like 90% of kids with anxiety disorders also have some kind of sleep problem. And yet we don't really tackle those sleep problems in our anxiety program. So that kind of made me to think that, well, we really need to start looking at sleep in conjunction with anxiety disorders and doing something about these kids' sleep. And at the same time, one of the research areas that's really closest to my heart is looking at preschool anxiety disorders in particular, because we know that really young children, as young as 3, can have these clinical kind of level anxiety disorders. And if they do, it tends to put them at risk for a whole lot of other things like anxiety later on, depression later on, all sorts of problems at school and so on. And so, as you sort of said in the intro there, I'm very passionate about treating kids as early as we possibly can so that we can prevent all of those other issues happening later. It just makes sense. If we can get to them earlier, the earlier that we can treat them, the better their lives are going to be. So when I looked into it then further again, I realised that it looks as though, from the evidence we have to date, that the sleep problems come before the anxiety problems even. So we've always kind of looked at anxiety as being one of the first things that happen to these kids. But in fact, it looks like the sleep problems come before even the anxiety problems. And that got me really thinking, okay, we really need to start tackling these sleep problems as early as we can. And so we got together with some of the really big researchers in the field. So Professor Lisa Meltzer from the United States and Professor Michael Gradisar from Flinders University here in Australia. And we put together a grant application and put it into Rotary to treat these young kids. And we were really lucky and got it. And so I guess that's the story of how that whole research program came into being.
Yeah. Well, it definitely sounds like sleep's a very important thing to make sure that kids are doing, because that probably affects their development as well. So yeah, tackling that with their anxiety. Yeah, it sounds like such an important project. So I guess when you were designing this project, what were some of the main aims that you wanted to achieve?
Well, the first thing we wanted to do was to develop a program that was specific to preschoolers. So what we found when we had a look at this and how we were going to develop the program is that preschoolers tend to get lumped in with babies and toddlers into these research projects. And if you think about the difference between an infant and a toddler and then a preschool child, their developmental differences are enormous, and the problems that they present with are great. That they're much different to each other. So the way an infant, a little tiny baby, sleeps and the problems that you might have as an infant are very different to the problems that a 4 or 5-year-old child might have with sleeping. And so lumping them all in together was something that we found a bit odd. And we wanted to develop a sleep program that was really specific to the preschool age group in particular. So we went about doing that. We called it the Lights Out program. And obviously it's a parent program because 4 and 5-year-old children are a bit young to come to therapy and a bit young to take on some things and put themselves to bed. So the program is sort of parent focused. And obviously we wanted to see whether it would improve their sleep. But we also wanted to see if we improved their sleep, given that sleep's supposed to lead to all of these other problems, if we improved their sleep, would it also improve some of those other things that we would expect, like anxiety, like behaviour problems? And one of the things we were really interested in is, would it improve their transition to school? So these are the kids that, we got them just before they started school, in the sort of term before they began formal schooling, which here in Queensland is called prep. And we wanted to see if we treated them in that final year before they started prep, whether by sort of halfway through prep they were actually doing better at school than a control group would be. So we developed the program, and as I said, we called it the Lights Out program. It's 6 sessions. Parents come into the program and they attend in a group sort of way at the moment. So face-to-face, 4 to 6 parents in a group or so. And we tested 128 of those parents. So we treated half of them and we didn't treat the other half. So we had a control group and a treatment group. We did treat the ones who weren't treated. We treated them later on, so they didn't miss out. But for the purposes of the project, we didn't treat them initially. And we tested them before they started the treatment, straight away after they finished the treatment, and then we tested them halfway through prep as well. And we found the parents really liked the program, and we got some good benefits out of it. So that's kind of the aims, was to help the sleep, help the anxiety, help the behaviour problems, and also see if we could do something about this transition to school, which is so important.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it would be a very beneficial program for parents of young children. And I guess, what did you end up finding from this research?
Well, we first of all, we found out that it did help their sleep, which we were greatly relieved, because that's obviously the main thing. So we found out that it helped their sleep in a number of different ways. Sleep's quite complicated in these young kids. It's not just, when adults have sleep problems, I suppose we think of, we're lying in bed and we can't get to sleep. And it's sort of like that insomnia type of idea about sleep problems. But most parents will tell you when they have a preschooler with sleep problems, there's a whole lot of different things that come into play. It's not just about them not being able to get to sleep. They put up a big fuss. They might be frightened. There's all these different types of issues that go along with sleep with preschoolers. So we tested all those different things, and we found out that the program was effective in reducing the number of different sleep problems that the children presented with. They also slept longer during the night, so their sleep duration was longer. They didn't put up as much resistance at bedtime, so they weren't fighting with their parents about going to bed and running around and doing everything they can to kind of stop going to sleep. They weren't as sleepy during the day, which is a problem when you have sleep problems with anybody, with kids or with adults. The big problem the next day is that you're tired, you haven't slept long enough. So we found that their sleepiness was reduced during the day. They were much more awake. And they were also less anxious at nighttime as well. So some of those nighttime anxieties, dark phobias and so on, were reduced as well. So we were really excited about the fact that it affected so many different facets of their sleep, I suppose. What we sort of weren't quite expecting quite to the degree we found, though, was that it didn't just help their sleep, but it also significantly reduced their anxiety problems generally, so not just at bedtime, but overall, and their oppositional behaviour overall. So not just at bedtime, but during the day and during other periods of their life as well. So remember, we gave the parents a sleep program. We didn't give them an anxiety program or a behaviour modification program. And yet it was effective in reducing these other things as well. Which was great. And then I wanted to delve a bit further into that, because I think, as I said to you, sleep is sort of a risk factor for things. So I was really interested in having a quick look at whether if we gave them the sleep program, whether it would prevent the later emergence of those anxiety and behaviour problems. So with kids who didn't have those to start with, did it stop them from developing those things a bit later on? Yeah. And we didn't have enough. You need enormous numbers to look at that properly. And this was a smaller trial. But nevertheless, we did find that there was some evidence for this prevention idea, that if we gave them a sleep problem, it actually prevented them from getting anxiety problems and behaviour problems later on. So that was probably the most exciting thing for me, because I feel like we're on the track of trying to help these kids, and we're going to do a much bigger trial to really look at that properly. We weren't powered, or we call it powered, means we didn't have enough people really to do the proper statistics that we need, but certainly there's preliminary evidence to suggest that that's the case, so that's exciting. The one thing we didn't find, which was a bit disappointing, was that there wasn't any evidence that doing that sleep program improved their transition to school as rated by their teachers. There were a few little bits and pieces in there, but realistically, we were probably a little bit optimistic, thinking that it was going to be the be-all and the end-all and fix everything. But nevertheless, I think the fact that it's really helped their sleep, their anxiety, their behaviour problems, I think they're fabulous outcomes. And we're really excited by those findings, and we're hoping to continue to do some things with that too.
Yeah.
Good.
Well,
really good.
It sounds very exciting. It sounds like, you're really on track to, preventing anxiety for kids in the future, like from what
we're hoping so.
What we've seen so far. And that's really what we love to see, like those, those studies that can find ways to prevent or intervene early, because I guess it's so important getting it early so that later on in life, when they become adults, they'll have a lot better coping skills. So
absolutely, and they haven't suffered unnecessarily all that time. A lot of people don't get treatment until they're adults, and they've already had 20 plus years of suffering with things. If we can nip it early in the bud, then we can prevent all of that distress.
Absolutely. And so you said that now you're looking at extending this trial to something bigger with more participants. Is that something that you're doing already, or something that you've got in the works?
A bit of both. So I've got a PhD student at the moment. We really want to. Funding's really important, so that's what we're working on too. But I do have one of my PhD students, Amy Shields, and she's conducting a study testing a video conferencing version of the Lights Out program. So it's one-on-one with parents, and she's already treated somewhere around 15 or 16 people, and she's only started in the last few months, so she's doing really well. And so we're only in the preliminary stages, but she's getting really good results, and the parents are really liking the video conferencing format. It's much more convenient than having to come in and do a group and try to get a time that suits everybody and so on. This is a very convenient version of the program for parents. So we look forward to seeing all of the evidence for that, but so far it's going really well. And I sort of mentioned before that I have a very long history, a 20-year plus history in the area of online programs for youth anxiety, and our BRAVE program specifically. And so I'm sort of amalgamating those two areas of interest, and I've just put in a grant application to the National Health and Medical Research Council to put the Lights Out program online. And to test it not only as a treatment program, but also as a prevention program. So as I said before, we need lots of people to properly test it, and an online format allows that to happen. You can get a lot more participants and people going through than is feasible in a face-to-face context. So fingers crossed that we get that one, but that's in being assessed at the moment. So we're really hoping to extend the research and hopefully, in a few different types of ways too. So
excellent. Well, I hope you do get that grant, and it'll be great to see what comes from it.
We are crossing our fingers, that's for sure.
So I guess in terms of clinical practice, is this a program that's now being used or has plans to be used? So you said that you want to put it online, but I guess in face-to-face therapy sessions as well.
Absolutely. It's a really interesting sleep in kids is really interesting because psychs aren't that well trained in treating sleep problems generally, but particularly in a pediatric population. So we know that something like a third of young children have a sleep problem of some type, which is a huge number. 33%, and 14% have a moderate to severe sleep problem. So that they're really big numbers of issues. And yet when we're not training our psychs to in those areas to kind of alleviate those problems at such an early age. So at Griffith, which is obviously where I'm from, we're training all of our intern psychologists in the Lights Out program, so that when the trial's finished, they can take that knowledge with them into their clinical practice and help other therapists and obviously help lots of families with this. If we can get it into an online format like we have with Brave, Brave is available to all Australian families free of charge. And so that's my big thing. That's what I really want to be able to do, is to get it online and get it out to everyone so that everyone's got access to that sort of evidence-based effective treatment. Yeah, so that's what we're hoping. But certainly at Griffith, we're trying to train up all of our intern psychologists to make sure that they know how to treat these kids.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's really great to see, what comes on from that research. You see if it's effective, but then you see it, helping real people, and that's where the real benefits come from. So yeah, that's really great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I know that like a lot of our Rotarians, that they're our main supporters, and they're very interested in hearing the success stories from the research funding that they help us provide. I guess, are you able to tell our audience how important it is to receive funding as a researcher in the mental health field?
Yeah, I can't even stress how important the funding is. We literally cannot do the research without it. Clinical trials research like this one, where you've got a control group and you're testing and it's all very well controlled so that we can really demonstrate properly whether it works or not, and those proper clinical trials. The number of hours that are required to recruit the participants, to test them, to treat them, to follow them up is enormous. And the money goes to me putting on staff to help with that. It doesn't go anywhere else. It literally is going to the therapists, to the research assistants who are running those projects. And without that funding, there's no way in the world I could do that on my own, It just wouldn't be done properly. So we're very grateful to Rotary, who took the chance and funded a brand new type of research, because it's really made a difference to the lives of those families. People who have children who don't sleep will tell you what a massive difference it makes to them. And if we can also then prevent other issues from happening, that funding has made a difference to hundreds of people's lives. So it's really, I can't stress how important it is to us. Yeah.
Well, I guess, we want to thank the researchers out there who have these great ideas as well. And it's about, sometimes funding those smaller projects because we see potential in them, and they become much bigger and help so many people. So thank you for, people like you who are doing the work and trying to, help prevent mental illness in young people. That's very important.
It's really important.
Yeah. And so I guess if anyone out there is thinking of making a donation to mental health research, I guess in the larger scheme of things, what do you think that would mean to the mental health of young Australians and improving that?
Look, I mean, as we've both said, I suppose that if we can treat kids at that very young age, we can really then help them their whole life. It stops that trajectory towards a whole range of really problematic things. So, for example, in the case of my research, we know that there's a really strong relationship between sleep problems in these very young children and the later development, not just in young childhood, but into adolescence and into adulthood, of things like depression, anxiety, even cognitive difficulties, hyperactivity, attention, even obesity. Something that people don't realise, and other medical problems. So that whole, mind-body connection is really important. And so if we can treat the sleep problems at that really early age, we take away one of the risk factors for that whole broad range of things that it's a risk factor for. And so I just feel like when we work with these young kids and these families, we have that opportunity to completely change the course of their life. And that's something many people don't get a chance to do. So I can't stress how important the impact of intervening early is, and what a difference it makes to these families. I can't stress that enough. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you're obviously very passionate about this area, and it's been really great to hear about your research today and what you've been doing, just to help. So thank you so much for joining me today. And I guess before we wrap up, was there anything else that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'd really like to thank Rotary again for funding our project and giving me the opportunity through the podcast and the other media releases and so on to let people know about it. And I'd really like to thank all of the participants as well, our wonderful families who came in, and our intern therapists who we trained to treat them. They were really dedicated to these families, and they were really excited about the opportunity to participate in the project. And they made an enormous difference to the lives of those families. So, yeah, there's lots of people that have been involved in this project that I'd like to thank. So thanks to all of you.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much once again.
No problem. It was an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for having me today.
No problem. That was the 27th episode of our podcast called The Research Behind Lift the Lid. It is always so inspiring to hear what researchers in Australia are doing to make a difference to mental health, and how they are helping us on our mission to lift the lid on mental illness. If you can, please support important mental health research like Caroline's by donating on the Australian Rotary Health website. Thank you for listening. Please join us again next time.